the blood of our people are your lands kept safe.
I see in your eyes the same fear that will take the heart of me.
So do all who live to see such times.
By all that you hold dear, this good earth.
There's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting.
Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, we have once again another non-Lord of the Rings related piece of content for you, but you guys seem to like it. Actually, you guys seem to have some thoughts on it. So we're gonna keep it going, and this time we're talking about none other than James Bond 007 himself. And I know this is going to maybe have some people want to angrily type in the comments, but this happens to be my favorite James Bond. And what about you?
My favorite too. Like as I said, it's a good as I said off camera. I think it's a good balance of it's the pace is good in those movies. It's fun. He's super cool.
Yeah.
It's like kind of a '90s campiness, but it's it still doesn't take itself too seriously like Daniel Craig one kind of does, but it's not kind of slow like the old ones can be. And the humor's there.
Yep.
And Pierce Brosnan is just a cool guy.
Yeah.
You can't deny that. He's very naturally cool.
Yeah, you're right. There's something there that is hard to articulate, and there's a cool factor where like you can look back and say, you know, Sean Connery was cool in his day.
Sean Connery was super cool.
He totally embodied Bond, and I think if you had Sean Connery in the 90s being as young as he was when he first was in Bond, I think it could still work. But times changed as they went, and like you said, in the 90s you had this campy, the action scenes were getting pretty intense for, you know, pre-CGI action. Like they still had to actually do practical effects for the most part. They were getting pretty big in scope, and at the same time you also needed to be able to push the pace a bit faster. You look back at some of those other James Bonds. I mean, I've gone through them recently. Starting around Christmas time, I went through and watched every single James Bond. And
I started. I didn't finish. I did. I think I got through to the Lazenby one. So I did all the Sean Connery, then Lazenby, and then I just stopped. I just got busy with other
so
things.
I will say the Roger Moore ones, I know some people think he's the best Bond. For like, I know that's out there.
I've seen a few of them, and I don't mind them. I actually think all the Bond actors are good in their own way, but I like Brosnan the most. I just do.
You're right. In their own way, they add something to the character, but for me, the actual plots of and this is not the actor himself's fault. It's the plots and the action. They get so weird that it takes me out of it. There's a movie where he dresses as a clown. Now,
Okay.
James Bond cannot be a clown. Okay, whoever wrote that, no. You clearly not read the novels. No. And then at the same time, obviously this is a product of its era, but just dealing a lot with space and sci-fi stuff. When
Right.
I know that happens in the novels too, but they don't actually go to the moon in the novels. Like Moonraker is a missile,
but
not on the moon.
Everyone got so mad at that, and it didn't bother me at all. But the very last Brosnan one, that killed the like I think they go into this that it killed the franchise because it was around the same time as Bourne Identity. They hated that like sunbeam ray thing that was melting all the ice. They hated it. They're like, it's unbelievable. An invisible car, I don't believe it. Like, I don't care.
Okay, but see, here's the thing, and this is why it's really hard for me to explain this to people. The ones that what you're talking about, to me, it is believable, and I'm fine with all of it. What I can't do is in the when the heck are the Roger Moore ones set? Are they set in the 70s?
Yeah.
or the 80s.
70s, 80s. Yeah.
There's like some billionaires built a space base on the moon. Like the actual Moonraker plot in the novels is pretty good, to be honest. They're should I do this? Should I actually explain it, or is it maybe
Go ahead.
okay? So the actual plot is there is a billionaire who lives in England who is in charge of funding the defense capabilities of England, and he is the one creating a nuclear missile that will be a deterrent to the Russians, or if the Germans were to become Nazis again, for example. And so James Bond is tasked with kind of going over and just kind of making sure everything is on the up and up. He's more of like an inspector that he's kind of injured from his last mission, so he's not going to do anything too crazy. And then he finds out that this English billionaire is actually a German who was hit by a grenade in World War II. And when he was rescued, he pretended to be British. And so when they brought him back to England, he took on this British persona, but he's actually German. And he's secretly now working for the Russians. And so he's going to send this nuke and have it hit England. And it's located in England. So he's going to just go straight up and fall back down. And so James Bond, in a race against the clock, has to prevent him from launching this nuclear bomb to hit England. To me, that is a fun story. I don't need to go to the moon. It's got all of it right there set in England. And you get a lot of good scenery shots if you're going to film this, because it's the base is set on like in the English countryside along the coast, but on like a cliff face. So it's even got that that stylistic cliff base type thing happening to it, that you kind of like you see it get made fun of in like Austin Powers, where like there'll be like the island and it's got like the face of Dr. Evil is on the volcano or whatever. So you have all of it there in the novel. And then when they made it into a film, they're just like, okay, he's going to do all of that, but instead his base is on the moon, and he'll be shooting it from the moon down to Earth. To me, not needed, and it looks really weird and silly when you think about it from a modern perspective. I know this is maybe a weird way to take it, but like looking back at some of the the computer components they have in that lunar base, and you're like, there's no way that works at all. So to me, they screwed up some of Roger Moore's films because of that. And they went too far with the humor. So Pierce Brosnan gets that perfect level for me of coolness. There's this macho-ness to it that he brings, but it's also got, like you said, like this cool kind of suave factor. Then there's the action and there's comedy, and it's all rolled into one. Roger Moore has a little too much comedy for me. It's almost like a fourth wall break sometimes. It's almost like a wink at the audience. Like, I can't believe I survived that. Like you know what I mean? So there's layer to it that I can't get to, and then I kind of tune it out. Pierce Brosnan, I think they've nailed it. And even the ones you're talking about, even the ones that seem to some people, I guess, completely insane, to me, they're not that insane. I mean, sure, the invisible car is a little crazy, but it's not as crazy as you know, some of the stuff you're seeing now in action movies that people are accepting. And to be honest, I would prefer the invisible car to the lunar base of the 70s. That's just me. But so yeah, anyway, I guess getting back onto this thing, this article is about how
I spit on those values.
Right.
So where does that mean?
Right. So this is coming from the fact that Pierce Brosnan also suffered from, I think, kind of poor writing. I mean, I like him, but I can't deny that his first film, GoldenEye, is his best. I think is the best of his tenure. Yeah. And that's a bit of a problem, although I think the same thing with Daniel Craig. Personally, I think Casino Royale is the best of the Craig bunch. But that's because it actually plays so close to the novel. It's almost exact, except they had to make it more modern, but it's almost exact. which I like. I like that it and that's why it's such a good film for me. When you go to some of those other ones, they have the same name from novels, but they take it into these kind of weird directions, especially having having the plot kind of be like a past agent of MI6 is behind all of this and is part of this secret shadowy organization. Like, so just to put this into perspective, I know we're kind of getting on the weird James Bond rant here, but the idea of having a shadowy organization, it wasn't shadowy in the novels. It was an organization that was a part of the Russian military that was almost, because of how secret it was almost separate from the Russian military and Russia itself. And that's why it seems kind of on its own level. And it's in charge of destroying spies. So that's what it's charged to do. It's to find and kill foreign spies. And the reason that James Bond gets roped into this is because he has recently made a name for himself with some of the other things happening in the novels. And so they decide they want to send a message to England, and so they're going to lure Bond into a trap and kill him. And that's how Bond kind of gets on the radar of them, and how they get on his radar. And so that's the From Russia with Love plot. They're luring him to Turkey, where they are going to assassinate him there. But obviously James Bond figures that out and saves the day and whatnot. But like, the point is, that's what that is supposed to be. But then in the Craig version of that, they made it seem like it was a former MI6 agent who like started this with like his brother, who's also kind of a twin, or I don't really understand what's going on in the Craig ones, clearly, because it doesn't make sense to me, because I'm going based on the novels. So yeah, I guess what we're trying to say is that to us, James Bond, there's a certain way of going about it that really resonates with us. And what it seems like happened was Pierce Brosnan was supposed to be in more Bond films. However, the Bourne trilogy came out, and that kind of upped the ante and changed this spy genre of films from that point forward. Because you can see the remnants of it in the Daniel Craig films for sure. Like literally the plot of having a former asset turn against you. I mean, that is the Bourne series, but that's also the idea of the villains in some of the Bond films for Daniel Craig. So you have that happening. And also Matt Damon being super young at the time versus Brosnan, who, to be honest, I mean, look at this photo. He doesn't look old, right? Like, I'm looking at the Pierce Brosnan photo.
He doesn't look old in GoldenEye, but he actually does. It's strange. He actually ages very quickly.
Yeah, that's
going
true.
Going from GoldenEye to, I get the titles mixed up, but the second one in '97. There's only 2 years difference, but he looked substantially older to me, going from.
I suppose you're right. It's like GoldenEye, he looks like he looks as old as Matt Damon, maybe. So there's a photo here of Matt Damon and Jason Bourne, but like Pierce Brosnan from GoldenEye looks about that age. So I would have thought he would have been fine to keep going, but I guess you're right. Thinking back, there is an aged look to him that might have caught the eye of some of the producers. And so what's crazy to me here is that he turned to Quentin Tarantino, who is a huge Bond fan, which is amazing. I would love to see a Tarantino take on Bond. Personally, I will say I'm not Tarantino's biggest fan. I own, like, my films that I like of his are Inglourious Bastards and a little bit of Django. I'm not as big of a Pulp Fiction fan as everyone else is. It's not that I hate the film. It's okay. I like the film. It's just not. It's not my favorite film of all time that some people think it is. And then I didn't really enjoy Kill Bill that much. I thought it had its moments, but it was pretty long. But anyway, I like Quentin Tarantino's ideas anyway, that he comes up with, and so I would love to hear this period piece, post World War II era Bond as a spy in British intelligence, trying to figure out what the Russians are up to. I think that would work. I think I've pitched this to you on our very channel, that's what they should do going forward, because at this point you need to kind of take a break from modern Bond, because like every film from literally, I think it's in GoldenEye where the female M first comes about.
Yep.
And the whole time, I like the dialogue and I like her character, but she constantly chastises Bond, both Pierce and Daniel, about being a sexist, era of the past type thing, this persona is an old persona that belongs in the past. I've always liked that kind of banter, because it is kind of true that the Bonds have always had this.
It's self-aware.
Yeah, the Bond has always had this sexist touch to it, and I'm fine with him being that way and then being called out for it. I'm not saying I want to be James Bond, but I just like the idea of the character, and I also like the idea of M calling him out and not taking his shit. So I like that. But that's been happening this whole time now. I think going back to a period piece where that's not part of it. So he can, you're not going to draw attention to the sexism in that comedy way. You're going to draw attention to it in other ways that are a little bit more real and telling a story from a different time. I think that's a perfect idea for a reboot. And also it allows you to cover some of the material in the books that wouldn't work nowadays, just because the things people did for pastime back then are different from what people do now. And so the settings have to kind of change when you try to retell these stories. And also just the idea of having, especially in England, having this strict hierarchy of these upper elites and the lower class people, because you really get that in some of these Bond books. I mean, heck, the reason that Bond is assigned to go on some of these missions is because he fits in with the elites. So when he goes, even though he's not an elite by any means, but he's able to go in there and fit in. And that's something that we don't really get that much of in the Daniel Craig Bond. We get that a lot we do get that with Pierce Brosnan. He's rubbing elbows at these fancy galas and ordering martinis and whatnot. And he fits in as if he is there, and that's why he's got this coolness to him that kind of goes with the actor. But you can't really do that much anymore when you tell these modern day things, because all the spies have to also mingle with the commoners, and Bond doesn't do that. He's actually in the books, he really doesn't care to interact with commoners.
Oh yeah, no, he's an extremely elitist character.
Oh yeah, he doesn't like people very much, and he is sexist, and he is racist.
No, I remember. Why am I who's the author? Ian Fleming. He did not like the choice of Sean Connery for Bond because he thought Connery was too lower class.
Oh really?
As a human, because he didn't grow up wealthy or anything.
Oh.
Like that. He didn't go to an Oxbridge college like Bond did.
Right.
He didn't. He thought Connery was a little too blue collar to play Bond.
Interesting. Yeah. So
they trained Connery to act upper class though.
Because I will say, Sean Connery does pull off that. You can kind of have that elitist attitude in his character.
They trained him to do that, but I think his personal background did not match what Fleming wanted for Bond, so he didn't like the idea of him. But he ended up turning around after seeing the films and see that he actually did.
Because like I will say, Sean Connery, like watching those films back, I pick up subtle moments of acting that are kind of not front and center, where he might order a drink, say from the villain, and then the villain's henchman will like make him a drink, and it's not very good. And so he has like this like he tastes it. He's like, this is bad, and like but like it's not part of the script. He doesn't say anything. He just like the look on his face is like, oh, this is your henchman doesn't know how to make a drink. That's just bad. And to me, that's like the funny coolness to the character, is that like here's this guy, he's about to be murdered, he's about to be assassinated, he's been caught, and he gets one final drink, they get him a martini, and his first thought is, oh, this is a bad martini, man. Like he's not even concerned about how he's going to escape this. His first thought is, that's a bad martini, you need to do it again and do it better this time. And so like that, I like that about the character. And that's something you don't get in a lot of these other more modern action hero characters. They don't have that aspect to them. And if they do, they're usually like the villains or something like that, where James Bond, because it's self-aware, because you're like laughing kind of at James Bond. I mean, heck, look at Casino Royale, where, you know, he is about to die. He's trying to like resuscitate himself. And then luckily his female companion saves the day and resuscitates him. And then he just kind of like goes back to the table, makes a joke about it. And the reason that's so funny is because we, the audience, know he basically almost died. The villain did kill him. He had to be saved by his female companion. The villain should have won that engagement, but he didn't. And now James Bond gets to joke about it, and he doesn't really care that happened. And there's like this coolness to that you don't see anymore from characters. So that's why I do hope we get something interesting with James Bond going forward. That's why we've been sort of talking about who might play it next. I wouldn't mind a Brosnan comeback, though, sort of like what we saw before. You know, when we had Sean Connery kind of come back for one last hurrah as Bond.
Oh, they're not gonna do that. I don't think they'd do that.
You know, but so right, like if you could get, so Tarantino is free. You get Tarantino to write and direct it, and it's a one-off. It's not going to be a thing, so you can still search for your next Bond. But this gets you just to put something out there. You don't think they would do that?
He's way too old now.
No, he's gonna be an old Bond.
Okay.
he could be an old Bond.
So they could do a huge flash forward.
Yeah,
I
so
guess
like
you could.
so how old is Pierce right now? Let's say he's like 60, 70?
No, I mean he's got to be in the late 60s, 70s maybe. I don't know actually. I'll look it up.
Cuz like what I'm thinking is
He's 70.
Okay. So basically what I think is let's say James Bond is operating and he's about like early 30s. You basically age the character up. You say, okay, he's 70 now, so he was 30 in the 1950s, right? And so you basically age him up and say that, okay, now it is 1980 or whatever, and James Bond is kind of retired, but he has to come out of retirement, and you set it in like the 1980s or something like that. And boom, you've got a kind of a fun little way of getting.
I mean, I actually never saw this movie, but they did do an unlicensed. There is an unlicensed Sean Connery Bond film called Never Say Never Again.
Yeah.
And that is the idea that he was coming out of retirement.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
It's good. I like it, and I want to see it. I want to see that with Pierce as well. Yeah. So the reason also I think it's important to showcase this, and not just because it's James Bond. This is gonna kind of relate it back to Lord of the Rings.
I think Brosnan is still substantially older than Sean Connery was in that movie.
Oh yeah, you'd have to change it a bit. I'm not saying it's gonna fit perfectly, but with Tarantino and and Pierce, and maybe some de-aging a little bit. I mean, heck, we're gonna go and see this Indiana Jones at some point. I'm sure
True.
they
could do the
they
de-aging
de-age him there.
detectives there. Yeah.
So I honestly there's a coolness to to Pierce that I think it would still work. I think he can still have that coolness, even if he's old. I would love to see it, at least an attempt at it, but I know it's a long shot. But to kind of bring this back to what we sometimes talk about Lord of the Rings, in case you didn't know, on this channel, is could this happen with all these Lord of the Rings things coming out soon? Are we going to start talking about who's the best, and then insert character? Who's the best Aragorn? Who's the best Galadriel? I mean, we're already talking about who's the best Galadriel. And I don't know if I want to do that with Lord of the Rings.
Well, okay. I mean, when I say Brosnan is the best Bond, it's not like I think they're all good. I think they're all good. Even Lazenby, I thought he was good too. They're all good.
Okay, Lazenby's okay at best. Some are better than others, though. I think. I mean, so here's the thing. I agree with you. They all, I think, did their role and their job in that role well from what their directors wanted. But it's not even up to the actors sometimes, and we kind of see that with Pierce's films with kind of a weird plots to them. But we're talking about like who is like if we're starting to talk about who's like the best version of this character, it starts to become kind of silly the way James Bond has kind of become silly, and you know, you got these fun theories like James Bond is secretly a Time Lord from Doctor Who. Like, I don't know if I want that for Lord of the Rings. I kind of like knowing who the best Aragorn is because he already played it.
Yeah, I don't think you're Viggo Mortensen. Yeah.
So
I'm not gonna beat that. I don't know.
So that's my one worry is like in 20 years time, we have these lists where it's like, who's top. Here's like 10 actors that have played Frodo. Who's the best? And I don't know if I want that. I because like here's the thing. Look at this James Bond film backlog. Do you think that people starting to watch James Bond nowadays are going to go back and rewatch all the original ones? No, they're not. They don't need to. Why would they?
Work.
Right. So this is like my big concern with what's happening with Lord of the Rings. I know we've talked about it before, but just to relate this all back, this is my concern, is that you end up having like people who don't know what they're missing. I actually do think some of the early James Bond films are great for their time, and I do think they still hold up to some degree. And so I would encourage people to watch them, but I know that people aren't going to because they are older films. They are dated. There's no question there. So, it just kind of makes me sad that because James Bond has kind of progressed, when you say James Bond, it's whoever the current actor is playing that role, and it's not the previous actor and the previous version of that character. And so in 20 years time, and we get another trilogy, Lord of the Rings trilogy, and people are talking about how cool Aragorn is and how cool Sam is, they're going to be talking about the actors playing them then, not now. And that kind of makes me sad. And I know that's like a weird nostalgia thing to be sad about, but I do think people miss out on some good films because of the fact that they are older films and that they don't need to watch them because they have a different version. In the next 10 years they'll get a different version, so you'll just wait for that. That's sort of my own little sadness about film history, and hopefully people will what I like films to do is sort of like how Star Wars has done it, where you aren't saying, you're not showing the same exact story. And so kids who watch the new trilogy might want to learn, oh, who's Luke? And then you can go back and watch who Luke is. And then you're like, oh, who's Anakin? And then you can go and watch who Anakin is. You know what I mean? Like there's a they're not the same story over and over again, so that you have a reason to go back and watch. And that's my hope, is that Lord of the Rings still has that reason to go back and watch the original trilogy. And it's not just, you know, you, me, a handful of these other YouTubers watching the original trilogy and nobody else wants to watch it with us. But yeah, let us know in the comments down below what you guys think. You know, it could be James Bond, it can be Lord of the Rings oriented. I'm happy to talk about more James Bond if you guys wish. Put it in the comments down below. You know, I love talking about James Bond as well, but just not as much as Lord of the Rings, I guess.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.